Hello and welcome to Gardening Basics with 4-HBC. This is our second lesson in a series of short videos on beginner gardening topics that range from planting your garden all the way to harvesting your own produce. My name is Lark. I am a 4-HBC ambassador, and it is my pleasure to introduce our gardening expert, Emma. Emma, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on our next session. My name's Emma, and I've been gardening for the last 10 years. I started off as a landscaper a long time ago, and after that I moved on to be a lead hand at an organic lavender farm. I graduated with my diploma in agriculture technology from the University of the Fraser Valley, and since then have been teaching a variety of horticulture courses. I'm really excited to share my information with you.
Wonderful. Well, we are looking forward to learning more about starting seeds and transplanting today. What will we be covering?
So that's exactly it. Today we're going to start looking at starting seeds. So this means direct seeding into your garden and also starting them in flats that you would start beforehand before putting them out into your garden, and then transplanting. So what it actually looks like when you're transplanting plants from either your flats or from something that you picked up in the nursery and putting them out into your garden. So our first topic we're going to be looking at today is direct seeding. So I hope you enjoy this quick video that I made about some go-to pointers for direct seeding into your garden.
Hey everyone, so we're just going to be doing some demonstrations on planting some seeds today. First, you want to make sure that you're looking at your seeds and making sure that they're going to be the right seeds for your area and that you're sowing them at the right time. So this morning we're going to be working with some Detroit dark red beets. These ones are best for planting kind of in mid to late spring, so that's what we're at right now. It's May down here on the coast, and so all of your seeds are going to have instructions on the back of them, which will tell you the best way to plant them. So this particular company is Salt Spring Seeds Company, they actually don't have a whole lot of instructions. They give you kind of a general instruction for a variety of different seeds. So you can see it says for tiny seed cover, very lightly, otherwise so no deeper than 2 to 4 times the seed diameter. So as you can see with these beet seeds, they're not that big, but they're also not that small, right? So with these ones, we're gonna sow them at 2 to 4 times their own depth. All right. So what we can do here, and you can see there's a lot of things already started in this bed. So we've got some beets that were started probably about 2 weeks ago already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some trenches with a hand trowel. And the nice thing about this is that it means that you get a nice straight line of your crops. It doesn't have to be too fancy, but it kind of gives you a really nice indication of where your seeds are going to go. So it's always good to think about how large your plant is going to get at the end when you're making your rows. And another thing to think about, and a lot of seed packages will actually tell this for you, is how much space you want to give to each of your plants. So as you can see right here, these ones are actually a little bit crowded. These plants are going to grow into each other, and you may end up having to thin them out at the end. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to put one seed in my row, and I'm going to put the other one kind of where I want that next plant to go. So you can see I'm giving it a bit of space here, a couple centimeters in between, and you can just do this all the way down your row. So you do have to be careful that these seeds don't get too buried, right? And you can just go all the way down your row. So now we have one row done. I'm going to move on to the second one. And so each one of these seeds will grow an individual beet. Down. Good. So I'm going to put what I don't use back in. And I'm just going to cover these. So I'm going to kind of pat them down so that you've got good contact with the soil. And then just kind of cover them lightly, because remember, you don't want it to be more than 2 to 4 times the depth of that seed. Right, so now we've got them all kind of lightly covered. Nothing has to be perfect. And you can still kind of see your lines in here. And then what can be a good idea, sometimes this is convenient because I have a bunch of bark mulch down here, but it's a good idea to mark your lines. So then what we can do is we can take a marker and we'll write beets on this, and then you'll know what you have planted there.
So that was a fun little demonstration of a really easy way to direct seed into your garden. As I said, it's a really good idea. You should always make sure that you're reading your seed package. This is a great way to start cool weather crops. So that's anything like your lettuces, your brassicas, your kale, anything like that. It's important to make sure that you give your plants enough room to grow and that you're paying attention to how much depth your seeds should be planted at. If your seed package doesn't have instructions on it and you're really curious, you can easily look on Google, or if you're going into a local garden center, you can try asking somebody in there. Like we talked about in our last session, it's a good idea to make sure that you're checking how much light your crop needs to grow before you actually plant it. So if you have a garden that's in full sun, make sure that the crops that you're seeding are going to be ones that like to have a whole lot of sun on them. So the next video that we're going to be looking at is starting your seeds in flats.
Okay, so now we're going to do a demonstration just on seeding some cucumbers. And cucumbers are a very warm season crop, so you need to make sure that you're really reading the directions on this one. So you can see this is a West Coast seed package. They're a fairly common seed supplier here on the coast. So when you look at the back of this, you can really see the instructions that it has here, right? So the last one didn't have a whole lot of detail. This one really does. So I'll kind of read what it says here. So these ones you want to either direct seed, so that's what we did with the beets, or you will transplant. So transplanting is basically when you start them in a flat, you will wait until they grow a little bit, and then you will move them out to your gardens after they have already grown. So with all cucumbers, they need really warm soil to germinate. So what we're going to do with these ones is we're going to actually put this in the greenhouse after we seed it. So what it says here is that if you're direct seeding, you actually want to wait until mid-June on the coast. So for those folks who are a little bit further north, that will be quite a lot later. So realistically, if you're anywhere other than the coast, you will have to start these in flats and then transplant them out to your garden later. So what we're going to do is just grab a couple, and I'm only going to do one seed per container or per cell here. And this is just a basic garden soil. You can use potting soil for this. You can use a seed starting mix. It really doesn't matter a whole lot. So this is all we're going to do here because each cucumber plant is actually going to grow quite a lot. So like we said with the other ones before, you're just going to cover it about 2 to 4 times its own depth. So I'm going to press it down into those depressions there and make sure that it's in, and then I'll just really lightly cover it with soil afterwards. Right. And that's that. So you make sure you label, and then we'll stick these in the greenhouse, and then in a couple weeks they'll be ready to go outside.
So that was a fun introduction to starting seeds in flats. This is a really good way to make sure that you can start your heat-loving crops early. As I mentioned in the video, we were putting those ones out into the greenhouse, but you can do this just as easily inside your own house if you have a big sunny south-facing window, or if you want to pick up some indoor growing lights from somewhere like Home Depot or Home Hardware or your local hardware store. That's just as good of an option as well. The nice thing about starting your seeds in flats or starting them beforehand is that it's a really fun way to start a bunch of different varieties and then trade with your friends. One thing that's important to note is that starting in flats does require planning ahead. So you need to know when to start your plants and then when to move them out into your garden for the best success. Next up, we're going to be looking at transplanting. So after you've started your seeds in flats, or if you've gotten them from your nursery, you're going to have to put them out into your garden. So here's a quick little video that demonstrates how to do that.
So this is the last thing that we're going to demonstrate this morning. So here you can see we have these flats. This is a flat where we started some kale seeds already. So this is a type of, I think it's a type of lacinato kale. There's a lot of different types of kale. So what we're going to do here is that you can see when we started these seeds, we put more than one seed obviously per container. So if you look at these and you look at the stalks at the bottom here, each one of these stalks is actually going to turn into its own little plant. So what we do when we have this happen is we're basically just going to separate them. So this is called transplanting. This is when you've started something previously and now you're transplanting it into your garden. So it's a little bit tricky, but what you're going to want to do is very gently pop out that entire cell, right? So you can see those are the root formations underneath, and you can see you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full kale plants. So it's best to do this on a day that is a little bit overcast. You don't want to transplant anything out, especially if you're going to do something like this, where you're just going to basically kind of really gently break apart that root system so that you can separate out each individual plant. You have to be really careful, but at the same time, you're not going to hurt it, right? So you do need to kind of just make it happen. And as long as you get those roots in there with it, they're going to be just fine. So like I said, you don't want to do this on a really bright sunny day. This is something that you're going to want to do if you've got, you know, a day or two of rain coming up so that they get a chance to settle into your garden. So now you have 5 individual plants, and you can go ahead and plant these in your garden. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to plant these. Kale plants get to be quite large. I don't know if I have any around here that I can show you as an example. But they will get to be quite big. So you want to make sure that you give them enough space. And when you're planting them, if you can see here, I'm just planting it right up to the depth that it was already in that soil beforehand, right? So you're not planting it any deeper. I'm going to put another one. If this plant gets to be about yay big and about that tall, I'm going to put the next one right here. So you always want to make sure that you leave enough room in between your plants. If you're ever wondering how much room you should leave in between your plants, really, really easy. Just look online. You can type it into Google and say kale plant spacing, and you will get a lot of answers that come up. So you can see, and I'm not being super delicate with it. There we go. And then you have one more plant right here. And then after you do this, your plants are going to be nice and happy. You just have to make sure that you water it really well.
So that's a nice example of how to transplant plants out into your garden. You can do this with plants that you have already started yourself, or this works just as well with plants that you're picking up from a nursery. So if you decide to not start your own seeds and go buy some already started plants from a garden center, that's exactly how you put them into your own garden. Some tips and tricks that will help you make sure that you have transplanting success. Make sure that it's the right time to move the crop that you're transplanting out into your garden. So if you're doing something like tomatoes or cucumbers, that it's warm enough for them to go outside. You're going to want to handle your seedlings by the leaves to avoid damaging the stem. If you're having a hard time getting them out of that container, a plastic knife or a spoon to help pop them out, or when you're handling that kind of cell, you can press the bottom of that black plastic and help pop that soil right out of the container. You're going to want soil and then press the soil down around the base of the plant. You don't need to bury it or kind of have it sticking up. You want it to be at the same soil depth as it was already in that cell. And then make sure, one thing we didn't talk about in the video is that you water your transplants really well. So this is one of the reasons why some people have their transplants fail, is that they don't water it enough. So make sure that you give it a good water and don't let them dry out. And it's also important to make sure that you're doing it on a cloudy day. If it's raining, that's even better. But if it's full sun, then that sun will actually scorch your new transplants. So now we're going to look at some regional planting charts that will give you an idea of when to start your seeds and when to put them out into your garden. So this link right here is going to take you to the West Coast Seeds regional planting chart. So here they have charts based on where you are. So coastal BC, south central BC, and northern BC. when you take a look at these charts, they're going to give you really detailed information about when you should be moving or when you should be seeding all of your crops. So you can see on the left-hand side here, you have all of the crops that you might be putting into your garden. And then at the top, you have this handy little legend, which tells you what all of these symbols mean. So all of these dots are going to mean that you can start your seeds inside. So when you see these, you will start them in flats and you'll put them inside or either in a greenhouse. And then when you see these kind of straight lines, that's when you're going to direct sow them straight into your garden bed. And then these stars mean that you're going to take the seeds that you've started inside, and that's when you're going to transplant those out into your garden. Another symbol that you'll see on here is this kind of loop, and that means that you're basically going to plant your seeds outside, but you're going to put a cover over top of them. This isn't something that usually we do with a lot of beginner gardening crops because it's a little bit more tricky, but it just means that you're going to cover it with something like plastic or a row cover. But most of the crops that you'll be dealing with, you won't have to do this. So this is a really good example of what a regional planting chart looks like. Another excellent planting chart is the Farmer's Almanac. So if you see here, the Farmer's Almanac actually has it for every single community that we have here in BC. So you get a really, really accurate chart that tells you when to plant everything for your exact area. I'm in Chilliwack, so I'm going to look at my Chilliwack, BC planting chart. And just like your West Coast seeds, it's going to tell you when to start your seeds indoors, when to plant your seedlings or transplant, and then also when to put your seeds outside, right? So these are when you would direct sow into your garden. This middle one here is when you're going to put your already started plants out into your garden, and this is where you're going to start your seeds indoors. So these are both really good resources that you can use to be able to know exactly when to either start your seeds inside, directly into your garden, and then when to put those started seeds out.
Thanks, Emma. It was really neat to learn how cool weather crops and heat-loving crops can be planted differently. I just had a couple of questions. I was wondering, what are some signs that your plants are ready to be transplanted?
That's an excellent question, Lark. So when you're starting seeds inside, you're going to see that you have either 1 or 2 leaves that will come up out of the soil right away after they germinated. These are called your first seed leaves. So once you have your first set of seed leaves, the next set of leaves that come after that, these will be your first true leaves. So it's usually a good idea to plant your plants outside into your garden once they have their first set of true leaves. You need to make sure that when you're doing that it's the right time of the season to be planting those plants outside, but as soon as they have those true leaves, they're usually good to go into your garden.
I'll have to keep that in mind. I was also wondering, why is it important not to damage the stem when transplanting?
Another really good question. So if you're holding your plant by the stem when you're transplanting and you accidentally pull a little bit too hard and you break that stem in half, it's pretty unlikely that that stem will grow back. However, if you're holding your plant by the leaves and you happen to rip off a tiny little bit of leaf, it's more than likely that that leaf will actually come back. So it's a better idea to be delicate while you're handling them and try to handle them by the leaves and then by the soil rather than the actual stem itself.
Thanks, Emma, for sharing all this great information on different ways to start your plants. Can you tell us what we'll be covering in the next lesson?
Absolutely. So next lesson, we're going to look a little bit closer into planting and when to start your plants and different types of companion planting.